and welcome back to the Behaviour Sleuths. I'm Sala. Hi.
Hi, I'm Monica.
And today we are joined by a really special guest, Bobbi Reilly from Australia. Hey, Bobbi.
Hi.
So Bobbi is a mediator, a counsellor, a trainer, somebody who has been in practice both in the public service and in private sector for many years, and so has incredible experience of mediating, counselling, and change, which is why she's here today. So I remember the first time I met Bobbi was at a conference. So we'd interacted online because she was supervising me, and we were having a coffee at the break, and we were talking about something, and Bobbi said, and I will never forget this because sometimes I kind of remember it when I'm having a dark moment, which is that she didn't understand when people say one door closes, another door opens. And she just looked at me, she said, you just kick all the bloody doors down, which I really loved. But I think also tells you a little bit about who Bobbi is as a person. She is not someone that sits quietly by. So Bobbi, welcome, and thank you for coming to talk with us about change.
Thank you for having me.
So we've been talking a lot about change, and this episode we wanted to talk about people who like change. And Sala said, "Oh, Bobbi likes change," and so we thought we would invite you. So I'm just going to put you in the hot seat and just start asking some questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So what sorts of change do you like, and what sorts of change do you not like?
As much as I like to go through all of the doors and recognize that they're all there, I think for me, change that I feel I have some level of control over is obviously my favorite. And change that I have no control over but have to adapt to in the moment, I find probably the most scary. Even though I find it scary, it still doesn't stop me from accepting the journey. But for me, the stuff that I can actually control and choose to change, I find really, really exciting. I guess it's that, that voluntary or imposed change. I think that is probably the two differences.
And do you feel, because you were just saying that you find change that you choose kind of exciting, and is there kind of a qualitative difference in how you feel about the imposed change physically or the voluntary change?
I think physically it probably sits in my stomach when there is change that I'm choosing or change that I'm accepting the journey. I do feel a level of excitement and I think wonderment as well about what it means and where it's going to take me. When it is change, though, that I can't control, it obviously sits in my stomach and I feel a bit uneasy and uncertain.
Right.
But at the same time, there's still almost that level of excitement that comes with it, but it's just, I guess, not as evident when I'm going through it. I always think that when we go through change and people look back and go, but it could have been, it should have been, and they look at the possibility of the other way. The reality is there is no other way. Once we take a step somewhere, the other journey just disappears. Like today, for example, I can go, I can leave work at 3 o'clock today or 4 o'clock today. And if I get home at 4 o'clock and think, if I had have left at 3, this could have happened. No, my car could have broken down and my life could have been very different in that moment. But I think a lot of us, we focus in on what could have been with change rather than just accepting the journey for what it is. We try and compare it to something that it just doesn't even exist. And I try not to do that, which I think helps me to accept the journey change and just accept it for what it is, because I'm a true believer that the universe has always provided for me. And I've never been without food. I've never been without shelter. I've never been without friendships and warmth and love and all of those things that we need to survive. So regardless of the change, and even if I don't understand the journey and it feels uncomfortable, the journey will take me where it will take me, and I can fight it or find some positivity and some acceptance in that journey.
I guess that's an interesting idea, that you take a step and then these paths no longer exist.
Correct.
But actually that step now means these paths now potentially exist.
Correct. Yeah, they may exist. Now I have choice that is different than I would have had. The rest is just hypothetical and just doesn't even exist. So I try not to go there and do that comparison, because I think when people do that comparison, they somewhat get stuck and they have regrets and all of those things, rather than just being present and accepting.
So has there been a change that was not in your control, an unwanted, unforeseen change where you struggle to accept? Do you have a memory or a story of where you're like, I just fought it, and then I finally gave in and it worked out?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got many of those. I think one that comes to mind is when I went from working for the not-for-profit sector into private practice as a practitioner. There was a time where I was working within an organisation and it was really quite uncomfortable. There was stuff going on in the organisation that was not appropriate behaviour. And I think they probably didn't like the fact that I didn't accept inappropriate behaviour. So I could see that the writing was on the wall for me, that I couldn't be there for much longer. I wasn't happy. They obviously weren't happy. So at that point in time, I thought I can stay and be stuck. I can stay and be unhappy. I can continue this particular path, which isn't serving a purpose for anybody. Or I can look at what my options are. So what I did was I kind of weighed up my pros and cons and looked at all of the different paths that were available to me. One of those included, being stuck and staying and trying to create change within that environment, or trying to see if there was another path. So what I did is I take a lot of notes and do a lot of lists and things like that. So I weighed up the different paths and tried to predict outcomes. They were obviously just predictions and they were all very scary because of that. But I got to the point where I decided that I needed to start to take steps that were for me, that were the path that would make me the most happiest. Probably it was it's definitely not the path of least resistance, but it was definitely the path that would potentially provide me with happiness because I was stuck. So I worked out how to do that and started to take slow steps so that it was somewhat comfortable in creating that change rather than just sort of jump. I just started to ease myself into the path that I wanted to go down. And as I did that, that path changed as well. So here's me thinking I'm going from A to B when I'm actually going from A to minus B to kind of all over the place, until I actually got to a different place, which may have been C. But I made the slow steps so that I felt a little bit more comfortable daily, and I could see a path that was creating happiness, until one day I did the big jump, and I knew then that I had, I guess, a parachute to some degree. I didn't know exactly where or how I was going to land, but I knew I wasn't going to thump to the ground. I had a safety net behind me that made the jump a lot easier and a lot less stressful. So for me, it was about the planning. That was a really long-winded answer. But for me, it was about the planning and the steps that slowly made me comfortable in accepting the journey of change, to then finally jump knowing I had a parachute.
I think it's interesting when you're talking about kind of writing the lists and putting out the pros and cons and doing the planning, because I am the total opposite to that. There is no planning. There's just blind leaping. But obviously one of the things that, in mediation we talk about a lot is the benefit of writing out and, journaling. There's a huge amount of research around the benefits of that. Do you think that was kind of a useful tool for you in figuring, in helping manage, this feels out of control, this I can control. I can control my list. I can.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I can, and by writing it down, I could actually see the paths. And when I do it, I actually do it as a path and like the different, sort of like the branches off a tree. So for me, I could actually look at a path, predict a path, and actually see it. And I'm very much a visual person. Those other times, Sala, though, when I'm just kicking the doors in and popping my head in and seeing what's in there is no planning. There is no lists. There are no pros and cons. It's like, what's in there? Let's check that out. And then I can always walk back out and close the door. But in this particular situation, I knew that I couldn't pop my head in and retreat. I had to find a path, which made that I guess that process of writing things down and journaling really, really important. And it made me feel safe, which I think was important. When things are out of control, you need to feel some level of safety.
Yeah, but it's also about you creating that sense of safety for yourself,
Yes.
not about anyone kind of providing it. It's you. I'm going to control it by, I'm going to make this tiny list, and then I'm going to draw out what these pathways look like, but I'm the one who is doing it. So I think that's a really interesting idea, to take that sense of from an involuntary change, but to make it a change that you have agency in.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that was the benefit of it, was that it made me feel that I had some level of control in a completely out of control situation. Yeah. And whether it was an illusion or not, who knows? But it worked. It worked. And I've never looked back. It was the best decision I ever made. And I sometimes, I said before, you can't kind of look back at the path and go, oh, coulda, woulda, shoulda. I sometimes look back at the path and go, oh, thank God. Because my path would have been one of misery, I have no doubt. But I was able to, I guess, qualify that by doing that process of journaling and drawing and predicting the paths. I could see where that one was going to lead. So for me, any other path was going to be a better path.
I don't know if I'm frozen, but if you guys
we can hear you.
What I was thinking as you're talking is you also had to overcome fear, even if it was a small fear, like daily. Okay, I'm going to overcome this fear today, push a little bit harder. Is there a memory when you feel like you just had to kick the door down because of fear? Like, this fear is so big, I just need to conquer it now?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was probably the next stage of that journey. So once I'd made the decision and I jumped, then I was out on my own. And even though I had landed with my parachute and I'd felt that I was relatively safe, at the end of the day, like everybody else, I'd gone into private practice. I had a mortgage to pay. I had a family to feed. I had bills like everybody else. So financially, it was a big risk. And when I'd done my, I guess, the progress, that was part of the mapping. But I think the mapping mainly focused on my own mental health and my own happiness, as opposed to what does life actually look like and how do I survive it. So for me, that was probably the next step in that, where the real fear hit. I knew that emotionally I would be okay. The universe would somehow provide, but would it be providing a different lifestyle for me compared to what I was used to? So when that did happen, for me, I then had to just really jump. I didn't have a choice. I had to go and meet people within private practice, which in Australia, it's the private and the not-for-profit world are very different, and they don't necessarily connect. So coming from the not-for-profit, trying to infiltrate the private world and being, at that different stage of my career was really scary. So I just had to make phone calls. I had to knock on people's doors. I had to, be really humble and, and try to connect with people that I'd never connected with before. So that was extremely frightening, but I just had no choice. I just had to literally kick that door in and make that happen. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. I would have survived the jump from my previous employer, but I would never have survived private practice.
So there's sorry, Sala. I was gonna say there's the excitement bit when you want the change, but then there's the fear bit when you don't want the change, but you manage them both differently. And it sounds like the fear, you just say, well, I have to do this.
Yeah.
And
I think with change, I think that's, I guess, my attitude towards it is that change happens constantly. We can't stop change from happening. So it is about trying to find a way of acceptance. Not necessarily loving it or getting excitement from it or anything like that, but just accepting the fact that it will happen with or without you. So you can find a way to work with it and manage it and control it, or have the illusion of control, or just let it drag you along for the journey. And I'm not somebody who wants to be dragged. I'm more somebody who's happy to walk for the journey and take the steps, but I don't want to be dragged. So yeah, I think when that fear hits, which we all get, it's about making a choice about, do I be dragged? Am I going to be dragged, or am I going to actually walk this journey for whatever it is?
Yeah. I think the other aspect that's interesting that you were talking about, Bobbi, is it sounds like one of the priorities was my mental health, how I feel, what my mental health is, and I'm going to just have faith almost that the financial aspects, the other aspects of this will work out. And I think that's also interesting, is that we can't, when change is happening, we can't guarantee that all of the ducks are going to line up in a row. We've got to be like, what's the priority duck? What's the lead duck? Go with that one and trust that we can manage the other things. So I think also...
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I think for me in that moment, if my mental health and happiness wasn't there, nothing else was ever going to happen anyway. Yeah. I would have knocked on those doors or gone and introduced myself to those people, but they would have seen that I wasn't confident, that I was struggling in some ways, that I wasn't a happy person, that I had all of these other things going on for my own mental health. So that to me is the starting point. If you have that and that feels strong and secure, you can then conquer other things because you have the strength to do so. Yeah. So for me, whenever I'm kind of looking at change and working that out, I always come from that place of how I'm doing and what I need, because sometimes it's a hard journey, and you need to have the inner strength to be able to do that. So to me, having that mental health strength is number one.
Yeah. Can I say that really resonates for me? Because when I left banking to go off and kind of start a mediation career, that was pure. The priority is I have to save myself. Yeah. That if I stay in this environment, it's so toxic and unhealthy for me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to, as somebody said, make a leap of faith that everything else will work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it was, what's the priority?
Exactly. And, without your health, you have nothing.
Yeah.
You can have all the money in the world. You can have, all the security and safety in the world.
But all the stock options in the world.
Yeah, exactly. But if you don't have your own health, nothing else is that important. So for me, that should always be the priority when you're weighing up those paths and looking at which journey is the best one for you. That should always be the starting point, or at least something very important when you're weighing that up.
Well, thank you, Bobbi. That's been really fascinating, because a lot of people are afraid of change, block change, run away from change, but you almost welcome it as the next adventure or the next journey. So before we end, is there anything you want to add about what benefits or what lessons change has taught you?
I think the benefit is that it's given me a wonderful life. It's given me a life of surprise. It's given me a life of wealth in a lot of ways. And I'm not talking necessarily financial wealth. I'm talking, love, friendship, kindness, generosity, connection, all of those things. So it has stopped me from being stuck. It has given me opportunity, which I think we all need. We only get one life. They say we only live once, but the reality is we live every day. So we need to make sure that we're taking advantage of every opportunity. And if we stay looking to the side of what that other path could have been, I think we won't see actually what's in front of us, and we won't be able to embrace that particular journey. So for me, that's probably the lesson that change and the excitement of accepting change has taught me. And if that resonates with anybody, then hopefully they may see change in a little bit of a different way and start to, I guess, not be dragged along and walk the journey.
Yeah, wise words.
I actually have that on a fridge magnet at the office. Let go or be dragged.
Yep. So true. It's so true. Yeah. And I don't like the feeling of being dragged. It's completely out of control. So yeah. And even though I don't really like the journey, I can still choose to walk it. Yeah, and if I'm choosing that, I can then look at other paths while I'm walking it.
Yeah. Well, I guess if your head is up, kind of walking on it, as opposed to just mired in it, you can see other things that are out there. Yeah,
that's right. And then when you're focusing on the gravel rash from being dragged, it's a little bit hard to see what's ahead of you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bobbi, for joining us. It was really fun to have you on.
Yeah,
Absolutely my pleasure.
bye.
Bye.